So thanks for having me back. I like coming here. And I also am teaching a class this afternoon from 1 to 3. It's about introduction to our tradition, Jodo Shinshu. And somebody was asking me where I came up with this class, and I said, the Vista Sangha ordered it. And Reverend went, what? What happened? So I thought it was a good idea. They said, we would like to hear what our tradition or our Buddhist school is about without comparing it and contrasting it to other schools and other traditions. So they said, like, don't compare it to Zen, or don't say Christianity's like this. This is your turn to just tell your story without comparing and contrasting. And then Reverend Rhoda said, wow, that sounds really hard to do. So it is hard to do, because that's usually how we learn in general, is we compare and contrast things. And I read that how some people are auditory learners and some people are visual? They also said that some people learn by contrasting, like seeing differences, and some people learn by comparing, finding similarities. So I thought that was interesting. But I'm not allowed to do that, either of those today. So I'm going to be teaching with one hand tied behind my back. And then the other thing I read just yesterday in a book, I was reading at church. See, now when I say work, I mean church. Before, when I said work, I meant programming. I was reading a book that said that if you're comparing two things together, and each of them you don't know that well, it's not that helpful, right? So if you're just starting to learn Buddhism, and then you compare it to Christianity, and maybe you don't know Christianity that well, it's not that helpful. Or comparing Jodo Shinshu to Zen is not that helpful if you don't know either that well. So it's not a good idea to explain something you don't know very well in terms of something else that you don't know very well. So I think Vista had a good suggestion. So today, this is related to the class at 1, but I kind of wanted to go over misunderstandings. I like to frame my talks before I get started so you kind of understand where I'm heading. But just like that quote we read, there's a religious aspect to being aware of your misunderstandings. In our tradition, it's a paradox, but you become truly wise when you realize how foolish you are. So when you realize that you're foolish, you tend to open up and be more embracive of other people's opinions. The opinions you hold are not that firm. Your mind is more pliable, more gentle, less dogmatic. And then the other thing I decided too is that sometimes things are, I have misunderstandings because they're confusing, and it's not my fault. I'm not dumb. Sometimes confusing things are confusing, and it's okay. You just have to study. It's not, I think in America we want to be right a lot, and we want to know things, and we want to make assertions. And I think Buddhism's saying that there's another side to that. Be open, be aware, listen, learn. So I'd like to go over some of that today. Before I start, though, I double-checked my facts last night around 10:30 at night. Linda and I were about to fall asleep, and I said to Linda, can anybody get a Costco card? Like, can anybody just walk in and buy a Costco card? And instead of saying yes or no, being my wife, she goes, why do you want to know that? You don't shop, and you only go to Costco when I take you with me. Why do you want to know that? Why are you thinking of buying a Costco card? I said, it's for my Dharma talk. I'm not going to go out and buy a Costco card. So I wanted to show you this. These are some of the things that I have found very confusing, and I'm sharing this with you. You can't make fun of me later. When I was a little boy, there was a big membership store called Fedco. And Fedco's gone now, but it was like a big deal if you had a Fedco card. And this is before Costco, before Sam's Club. I think this was like, at least in my memory, I was 5 or 6. This is like the membership store. And you could only get it if your mother or father worked for the federal government. So Fedco, like a federal co-op. Maybe that's what it stood for, federal co-op. So you have Fedco. And I didn't understand why my dad got a card, because he worked for Hughes Aircraft. But this is where the membership rules start to get bigger. So because my dad worked at Hughes Aircraft and they had a lot of federal defense contracts, that he was considered in some tangential way a federal employee, even though he's really not. And so the rules start to bend and stretch a little bit. But anyway, this is where we went to shop. It was a big deal. I don't think membership stores, they almost seem to be membership and name only. You know, anyone could be a member of Costco, I think. So I grew up with this in my brain. And then, I don't know if you remember this, I don't know if it's still going on, but there was a place called Club Med. And, okay, I see a lot of people going. All the young people are going. Club Med, you could join, and you could go to retreats or paradise places, you know, like in Hawaii, resorts, and you could go to these really wonderful vacations. And I was like in my mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, and Lynn and I were married, and I always thought this would be so cool to go to one of these places. I love going to warm places. I want to go to Nassau, and I want to go to the Bahamas, I want to go to Bermuda, but I said, Linda, it's really sad, it's really a drag that, you know, I could never go to Club Med. And she went, what? And I go, yeah, I can't go. I'll never be able to go. I always wished I could have gone to Club Med the last 10 years. I've always wanted to go, but I can't. And I said to her, you might be able to go. And she goes, why would I be able to go and not you? And I said, well, you're a dental hygienist, right? Dental hygiene is kind of like medicine. It's kind of like in the medical field. And Linda said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I'm a programmer, and you work in the health industry, so maybe I could go with you, maybe, now that we're married. She goes, it's Club Mediterranean. It's Mediterranean resorts. And I went, oh, I thought you had to be a doctor. I thought it was like Fedco. I thought you had to be a medical doctor. She goes, no, where did you get that from? I go, what's Club Med? Medical, Mediterranean. Oh, so I could have gone. Yeah. So I never went to Club Med. And then, okay, good. I think my batteries are low. See this pet vet? This is a sign on beach heading, if you head south on beach at Adams, there's a 50, I think this went out of business. This was 50/50 hamburgers. It was really good. There was this, I think, Japanese restaurant. And then there was this veterinarian place. And I saw this every day, and I said, I don't understand why this is here. I said, it makes no sense. Does everybody have exotic animals or something? I mean, I don't know of anybody in Huntington Beach that has a monkey, or a gorilla, or an ape. Nobody, I think it's against the law. I don't even think you're allowed to have a monkey. And Linda said, what are you talking about? And I go, this crazy exotic pet place, I don't see how they stay in business. How many people have a gorilla or an ape or a chimpanzee? And she goes, no one does. What does that have to do with anything? This is a silhouette of a dog and a cat. But if you look at it from right to left, I thought those were the ears of a monkey, and those are his arms, and those are his legs, and that's his bottom. I thought that was the monkey's bottom, his rear legs. I thought the monkey was going like this. So this is the picture, not this. And I got kind of mad at Linda because I said, I was so positive I was right, that this is an exotic veterinarian at Huntington Beach for people who have monkeys. Well, it's not. It's a dog and cat vet, just like any other vet. So every time we drive by there, Linda always elbows me and goes, how's your monkey doing? And then the other thing I wanted to show you, I've got a couple, I think I have 2 or 3 of these, but Reverend Wondra, I don't know if I told you this one, but Reverend Wondra, this is the, these are the 3 Pure Land Sutras in here. The larger sutra, the smaller sutra, and the visualization sutra are in here. And we chant the Jusege, and today we chanted the Sambutsuge. You can actually open up this book and find the Jusege and Sambutsuge in here. And I'm always the doubting Thomas. So I felt really good to actually see. I mean, you can open this up and find Kogen Gigi in here. And you can actually see it because it's prose. Remember I told you the larger sutra is prose, and then the Jusege and the Sambutsuge are poems or verses. you'll see like these kind of random lines, random length lines, and then all of a sudden you'll see a place where there's 4 characters, 4 characters, 4 characters, 4 characters, and you're like, oh, this is what we're chanting. So I asked Reverend Wandra, who knows, I don't know if you've ever heard this saying, but Reverend Wandra has forgotten more about Buddhism than I will ever know about Buddhism, right? She knows a lot. She speaks Japanese, she reads Chinese, she's getting her doctorate. So I asked her one simple thing. I said, when you go to Japan, could you please buy me this sutra book from the Honganji Temple in Kyoto? And she did. She brought it back, and she gave it to me, and I think this was like 30 or 40 bucks, and I paid her back. So it's kind of expensive. And she gave it to me, and as a Western person, I opened it this way. And I was like, oh, she only got me half. It comes in 2 volumes. She only bought me half the set. And it was not the larger sutra, which I really wanted. It was the smaller and I was really upset. I didn't know what to say to her. I just spent 40 bucks. I got the wrong volume. And I forgot that in Japan, you open the books the other way, and it's 2-sided. So it's the whole thing. I always think Reverend Wandra, my first assumption is, oh, Reverend Wandra made a mistake. But no, I opened the book from the wrong direction. So this is the whole thing. She got it for me. I didn't know how to break it to her. I didn't know how to say, you got me the wrong thing. But of course, I read it backwards. And then there's a book I have at home with, I always tell you I read those books with different scholars, and they're all like maybe 10 pages each. At the end of one of those books, they ask these scholars, what's the biggest mistake or biggest misunderstanding in Buddhism that you're most regretful about? And one female scholar said, they put the H in the wrong place. She said, a long time ago, we put the H in the wrong spot. And I do this a lot. Now, Reverend Harada doesn't do it because he's more trained than I am. But Americans always say, and it was just Halloween. This would have been a good talk for Halloween. We always say, Buddha, the Buddha. And the scholar said, it's not Buddha. We all say it. I say it too. Buddha. She said, we should have put the H here. And she said, Americans might have realized it's Buddha. Buddha. So that's how we're supposed to say it. And I listen really close at services. Reverend Rhoda says Buddha. And I always say Buddha. So I thought this was interesting. Somebody put the H in the wrong spot, and everybody says Buddha wrong. Buddha wrong. So I wanted to share this with you. This is something that I got confused about Buddhism, and I think I used it in one of the classes here at Vista a month or 2 ago. There's 6 qualities of the Dharma, of the Buddhist teachings, and one of them is this one. It says the Dharma is well expounded. It's excellent in the beginning, it's excellent in the middle, and it's excellent in the end. And so I thought this was kind of like an advertisement for like a movie or a book. Like when you read the larger sutra in here, it's really good in the beginning, right? It's not slow, it grabs you right away. The story is really exciting, and then the ending is just great. So I thought it was saying like every Buddhist sutra you read is going to be a really good read, and it's really worth reading. So I thought of it in terms of the premise, the story, and the finale. And I think I've mentioned before, like, did you watch the show Lost? It's a while ago. The ending was terrible. The ending to Lost was terrible. There's a lot of movies where it seems like they have a really strong premise, but they don't have an ending. And you know, like, have you seen the movie The Sixth Sense with, Bruce Willis? It's almost like they started with the conclusion and then roll their way back. So I think the great movies, like Alfred Hitchcock, they know the ending, and then I think if I was going to write a book or a movie, I'd start with the ending and then roll my way back. But I think they go the other way. They don't really have an ending, and then the movie suddenly is over. So when I read this, the first thing I thought of was, this is just like Maxwell's coffee. It's good to the last drop. So that's what I thought that meant as a Western person, that the teachings are good to the last drop. The middle's interesting, the beginning's interesting, the ending is good. But then I started reading more books, and somebody finally explained this. When they say it's excellent in the beginning, they mean behavior, conduct. all the sutras deal with some sort of conduct or behavior. Excellent in the middle means that awareness, insight is very important, or awareness is very important, meditation is very important. And then excellent in the end, insight or wisdom is important and contained in the sutras. And so it has nothing to do with how easy or hard it is to read or how interesting it is. It has to do with the fact that all the Buddhist teachings have an element of conduct, mindfulness or awareness or meditation, and lastly, insight or wisdom. And then the one last thing I wanted to mention, since we're going to talk about our tradition today at 1, most Americans or Western people think of Buddhism going in this direction. And it does seem like it is, because you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You kind of think that you start out with rules of behavior and conduct. You change how you behave. By doing that, you become maybe more aware or a little bit more open to others. And then once that occurs, you begin to develop, lastly, you begin to develop insight or awareness. And this kind of path takes a long time. And it tends to appeal to what I've called before Protestant Buddhism, because you kind of start with doctrine and rules of behavior. And that's appealing, usually to, it was to me. Remember I told you I wanted to turn in the 10 Commandments for the Eightfold Noble Path? So I was looking for a new set of rules, like I wanted Reverend to say, cut your hair and don't eat McDonald's anymore. And that to me was Buddhism. But in our tradition, in China and Japan, this is something that happens a lot, is they reverse the arrow. And it's called shortening the path. So what happens in our tradition is we really begin here by listening to the teachings. And we really try to be aware of the teachings. We actually use the phrase perfuming the mind. It changes our perspective and our orientation. And through that change of insight and awareness and orientation and being exposed to new ideas and new ways of thinking, it naturally begins to be embodied or enacted through our daily life with heightened sense of awareness. We begin to see things differently. And we begin to be aware of things we were never aware of before, like the monkey sign and FedCo and Club Med. We start to be open and listen, and then our behavior naturally begins to change as an expression of our insight and our awareness. So the teachings become concrete as they begin to play out in our behavior in our everyday lives. And so it is a little bit confusing, I think, but Chinese, Japanese Buddhism, this arrow gets reversed from Indian Buddhism, and we begin to focus more on our main practice of listening to the teachings, and our behavior is a consequence of the awareness and openness that we begin to develop through being exposed to the Buddha's teachings. And so I have to constantly remind myself that we're really going this way, not this way, in our tradition, and even in Zen. And this is a very important aspect of Eastern Buddhism. And they actually call it shortening the path. Going the other direction takes a lot of willpower and effort, and maybe monastic tradition. But the other direction in our tradition, starting with insight, it can be sudden. You almost don't try. Stop calculating and just let the teachings kind of wash over you. And they just gradually, you become immersed in a new way of thought, a new way of thinking. And it does slowly change the way you perceive the world, the way you interact with the world, and the way you express yourself in the world. So this is a big, confusing, stumbling point for our tradition, because we don't lead with behavior. We lead with the teachings. And that seems sometimes to some people, like me, in the beginning, I thought that didn't seem like Buddhism to me. It seemed like we shouldn't be eating McDonald's. Why are we just listening to the teachings? It seemed too passive. But that's how we develop a new framework, a new mental framework, which shifts our paradigm and how we see life. So please join me in Basho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you very much.